Hello and welcome to another segment of Western Wisconsin Journal. I'm Jamie Johnson, the government and legal correspondent, and today we have a candidate for Hudson City Council. And with us today is Joyce Hall. So Joyce, why don't you start with, well, first, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
And you are the incumbent for this coming race, but why don't we remind our viewers, because I think you were on 2 years ago when you ran, why don't you remind us again of some of your qualifications that you've brought to this job and where you are today.
Okay. Well, thank you for inviting me today. I'm glad to be able to get my message out to the voters again. And also, I'd like to say thank you to the voters for entrusting me with this. I feel it was really an honor to have served for the last 2 years, and I hope that they will vote for me for another 2 years. I'm currently on the council and on the Public Safety Committee. I'm also serving on the Cable Board and the Park Board. I was on the Library Board of Trustees for a little while and also the Finance Committee for the Library Board. I was the liaison to the school district for a little while as well. Another qualification that I have is that I was on the North St. Paul Solid Waste Commission for 5 years when I lived there in the 90s. Then some other qualifications that I have a Bachelor's of Science in Chemistry from UW-Eau Claire. I have a PhD in Organic Chemistry from University of Minnesota. I worked as a chemist, a research chemist at 3M for 9 years, and now after taking some time off to raise my family, I've got 2 children, and my husband and I have been married for 33 years. I am a technical college instructor. I'm working for Wisconsin Indian Head Technical College now, part-time. And then I've also been a community volunteer, a Girl Scout leader, and now I'm doing volunteer tutoring for literacy for WestCap. So I really have enjoyed public service, and I've enjoyed listening to the citizens of District 6, and I'm looking forward to doing that for another 2 years.
Well, I want to stop there, go a little off the questions that we had, but when it comes to district, you mentioned District 6. Mm-hmm. Give our voters a little idea of what area that is here in Hudson.
Okay. District 6 pretty much surrounds the high school. It goes to the eastern end of the city and the northern end of the city. Then the western edge of District 6 is 9th Street, and the southern edge is Vine Street for the most part, but it goes south of Vine and to include the area surrounded by Vine, Grandview, Hunter Hill, and Wisconsin. So all of the condos that are in the area right next to St. Patrick's Church.
Okay, very good. And how long have you lived in Hudson overall?
We moved here, well, my husband moved up back to Hudson, or the area, in 2007, and then I moved up in 2008 and have been living here since then.
All right. Mm-hmm. And thank you for, that's a pretty complete answer on the qualifications. So obviously you mentioned you've got your first 2-year term under your belt. Why do you want this job again? So why do you want to serve for another 2 years?
I've really enjoyed listening to the people and being their voice on the city council. I'm I've enjoyed helping them with the concerns that they have, finding the right resources in the city. I've enjoyed getting to know the city employees. We've got a lot of dedicated employees who do an excellent job, and so just some of the little things that don't seem like a lot, but take some time. For example, there was a drainage problem on one of the corners, and one of the residents brought it to my attention. I brought it to the attention of the city workers. They really worked on it, but then I had to help guide it through the city council and make sure that the resident was informed every step of the way, and then we got that finished.
So is the job bigger than you thought, harder, easier?
You know, I didn't know what I was getting into, but overall, it was different from what I expected. I guess I expected that it would be a little bit harder, but no, there are some things that are difficult. Some of our decisions are difficult to make, but I've enjoyed talking to the residents and working with the other council members, working with the city workers, and doing the job.
Okay, well, so what do you see as the most important issues that the city council will have to address over, say, the next 12 months or so?
I would say that downtown parking is probably one of the biggest issues that we're going to be dealing with. And we have already gotten a study done, so the city council voted to hire an outside contractor to study the issue, map out how many places, parking spots there are and how well used they are. And they also made a recommendation that a ramp be built. I think that that's a great option, but I think that I'm looking forward to discussing it as a council and getting input from the community because it's a big project that needs to be done. I think that we also need to take a page from the school district and how they got the community involved with the high school reconstruction and remodeling and get some more input from the residents so that we can do it right, make sure that we find the best location, make sure that it's not a burden to the taxpayers, but yet that we can have reasonable prices for the parking downtown so that we do bring in business because we want to make sure that business owners are also served well for this. So it's a tough problem, but I'm looking forward to addressing it.
Okay, well, I think that was on my list of things because I know as a customer, a frequent customer of downtown Hudson businesses, it's rare to find a good parking spot and at times when you need it, I should say. Certainly Sunday mornings you can go through the downtown and find some open spots, but even that's filling up with the various restaurants we have. So.
And evenings are really difficult. I've experienced it myself. I've heard from other people that they are concerned about the parking issue. So yes, I agree that that's something that needs to be addressed.
Okay, well, thank you for raising that. We'll see if there's anything more that we have to address there. But do you see any areas where the city could reduce spending without reducing services?
You know, the city employees are so dedicated. They're so careful with the city's resources. I don't see a lot of areas where we could really reduce the spending. I think, though, that the project that we just have completed of replacing lights with LEDs in order to save energy has been a good one. I think that we could extend that, and the city looked at solar power at one point and found that the payoff was too long to make it really practical for the city. But things have changed since that study was done.
Technology changes, and yeah.
So I think that it might be worth looking at that again to see if maybe that would save some money in the city. And River Falls is doing some solar. I think that might be a good fit for Hudson as well.
Okay, well, we're on the subject of spending. What about the infrastructure? Because obviously that's a very big investment for the city's budget. What do you think of the city's plan? I think there's always a 5-year plan in place.
Yes.
But what do you think of the plan for maintaining and improving our City of Hudson's infrastructure?
That's another place where it's really difficult to balance the needs of the city with the amount of tax money that's available. And I think that the city has done a really good job of making sure that the main roads are taken care of. And then part of the plan is to also, as bonding has been done, if there's leftover bonding money, then some of the side roads get done. And so, for example, in the 6th District, we've got Fillmore between 11th and 12th, and that is just really in poor shape. And so that's one of the things that I've been asking for is that if there's money left with the bonding, that it be used to clean up that area. And there are other areas that need some work as well, but I think that we need to keep working on the main roads and then do the best we can on the side streets.
Pardon my ignorance of the city's infrastructure plan, because I'm not a City of Hudson resident, I'm a Town of Hudson resident, but do they basically have a plan that divides up the primary routes into sections and say we're going to do this in 2019 and this in 2020 and then maybe the same for side streets, or how does that work?
I know that they have a list of all of the city streets and they grade them according to the level of or what kind of shape they're in.
Okay.
And
So the amount of deterioration and then balanced with how much traffic they get.
yes, and then so for example, this summer, Grandview is going to be done from Vine down to Laurel because that has deteriorated enough, and there were issues with concrete. The year that it was put in, there were problems with concrete from a number of manufacturers, and so the curbs and gutters have to be replaced as well. So they prioritize with the main streets.
Okay, very good. Well, so we go from infrastructure to just overall development. So I got a couple that go to development. First, when it comes to annexation, people who are longtime Hudson residents can remember when on south of the interstate all there was the Hudson House and Dave Holt Ford and the Fleet Farm. Well, now the Ford dealership has changed hands and everything's built up around those establishments, and we have Crestview and we have lots of expansion there. Just in the time I've been in Hudson, which is about 27 years, we've gone from 1 to 3 industrial parks. So do you see the city of Hudson continuing to annex land, or is there going to be review of the comprehensive plan soon? Do you know?
Well, the comprehensive plan is scheduled to be reviewed in the next couple of years, and I'm anxious to work on that. I think that that's something that's really important to the city, and I'd really like to see more structure for where we want to go as a city. Also, I'd like to see more of the capturing the essence of Hudson and having some kind of a motto or something like that that would really work well for our city. But as far as annexation goes, yes, I think that it should be part of the comprehensive plan. But annexation is initiated by the landowner. So yes, we could encourage an area to apply for annexation if it made sense for them to do that. I think that it's always going to be handled on a case-by-case basis. If it makes sense for the city to do it, if the advantages outweigh the disadvantages, then yes, I think that we should annex the land as things come up. But it's not something that we have a lot of control over whether
well, and to your knowledge,
they
do
apply.
you recall anybody applying for annexation in the last 2 years since you've been on city council where it's been denied?
No, it hasn't been denied. There have been some annexation requests, and there haven't been any problems with them.
Yeah, and I think part of the hold, if you will, I mean, people try to compare us to River Falls, and River Falls seems to be on a race to annex and get up to Troy Township and get up to the Hudson border faster than we're looking to go south. But part of that's been slowing it, I think, is the indecision or uncertainty, if you will, about the dog track and the golf course, what was going to happen there.
Yes.
And now we see development in both of those areas,
Yes.
so that may impact quite a bit where we look for extraterritorial zoning. There's some logical places, at Carmichael and Vine, for instance, that there's still some vacant land there.
Yes.
So it's not completely gone, although there have been people worried that there's not much land left and what are we going to do. But I think we've got some good leadership, and so where there's a need, then there'll be find a way. So, all right. Speaking of development, just looking about redevelopment, then we have a huge treasure in the St. Croix River and lakefront, the Lake St. Croix, if you will. And so we have Lakefront Park, and there's a lot of talk of what's going to go on there. We have some older buildings that have been sitting vacant down there for a while, and yet that's contrasted with major increase in the number of good restaurants we have in downtown Hudson, so which will lead to the parking question. But just focusing on redevelopment, what do you see happening there, and are you a proponent of redevelopment?
I don't like the word development when you're talking about the lakefront because that makes it sound like we're going to be building a bunch of condos down there, which no, I think the lakefront park needs to be preserved to be used by the residents. We've already authorized a study by a landscape architect, and I think that I'm really anxious to see what he comes up with and the plan. But my vision for it would be that there would be a good plan as far as making sure that we have good walking paths and bicycle paths, and that we preserve as much as possible, so for example, the band shell that's well utilized, the picnic areas, but also working on the pier area and making sure that that is working as best as it optimized, so that to bring in business. Mayor O'Connor had talked about having an open dock so that people can come in on their boats, tie up, and go out for dinner downtown. I think that that's really a good idea, so I'd like to see that
So
in the
these
plan.
may be improvements that might just encourage additional use. It doesn't necessarily mean building in
Yes.
Lakefront Park, but
Enhancing Lakefront Park so that it can be better used, and to encourage people to get outdoors and get exercise and enjoy the waterfront, things like that.
okay. Well, we've already used it twice on those warm winter days that felt spring-like. We were down at the dike, and I think that's a very popular thing for folks to do, take a stroll down there. And so I guess I didn't even look closely at my question. It did say take place in Lakefront Park versus around Lakefront Park, because there are some uses that may get potential for change. I mean, one of them is the talking about where parking garage might be or ramp might be located. And I could see that being another benefit for those that want to use the park, is having some parking, because that too it's rare to get those the slanted parking stalls that are
Yes.
there at Lakefront. Those are rarely open, it seems like, and when there's nice weather
Yes.
anyway. But so is there been other movement in that regard, maybe not in Lakefront itself? You mentioned the mayor's idea of improving the boat launch and so forth. Are there any other ideas that you've heard, maybe in the area?
I mean, for downtown?
Right.
Not that I can think of that. There's, we're always talking about things like what to do with public safety space, so for example, the firehouse. Right now, a study has been commissioned to look at different locations for a satellite, so that we have better response times for fire protection, and probably up on the hill. Because
Well, that seems to make
needs
a
to be
lot
done.
of sense, just because of the way that Hudson developed. I mean, you've got the downtown lakefront area, and that's currently where the fire department's located, but having that satellite where there's, because it's not just the city, it's all the townships, and having
Yes.
some easier access, to get outside of the city. So that I can understand that. Let's revisiting these parking issues. It's more of a normative question, what should be done? I know that there's ideas of what can be done, and there was that study. What do you think should be done about the parking? Other than you mentioned about you really like the idea of engaging the community and getting
Yes.
the community's input, rather than this be a top-down decision. You want it to be more of an organic. I get that. But do you have any ideas on what preliminarily maybe it looks like the better direction to move?
It's really a tough question, because placing a parking ramp that's a decision that I think that we need input on that.
Right.
So, for example, the FIPS is one area where more parking is needed. But now, could we do something where during FIPS performances, could there be some kind of public transportation instead of trying to get all, because there's 250 seats in one auditorium and there's 125 in another. If both of those auditoriums are being used, then we've got a lot of parking needs. But are there some other ways of getting people to the FIPS without having them parking right downtown. I think that that would be worthwhile exploring, especially since it's going to take a while before we can put up a ramp. And I'm only one voice on the city council. We'll have to see what happens when we discuss the.
I think that's a great point. You could have all kinds of ideas, but if you're right now, I think it's important. You're saying basically it's an open, clean slate, and your mind is pretty open, not made up in what direction to move.
And I've been looking at the parking issues. There's a professor in California named Donald Shoup, and he has done some videos, but he's also written a book called The High Cost of Free Parking. And what he talks about is how much it costs to maintain if you've got free ramps, that the city has to maintain that, and that means the taxpayers. And so that's why I said it's a balance between making sure that the taxpayers aren't being respecting their pocketbooks, but while also
some kind of balance between the user fees, because you've got the restaurants, which they definitely benefit from having their customers have close by parking, and so seeking a contribution there. And while the city overall benefits, you're right, there needs to be a balance. We mentioned parking ramps, and I just was down in my hometown where I was born, and we were there until I was about 13, but Monroe, Wisconsin. Town about the size of Hudson, population-wise, and they're tearing down their parking garage or ramp that's right near their downtown area. But that's because it was built at a time when the clinic was also in the downtown location, and so they've seen some mass exodus, if you will, or changes in the downtown businesses, and just became dangerous, and they only last so long. So that's the thing, the ability to get the payback. You mentioned the maintenance. They're not free, and there is a cost associated with them.
And yes, and that's something that I talked to. I had a conversation with a Hudson resident, and she brought up the downtown parking, and I said, it's not a simple issue, because if we put up a ramp, then we have to budget for maintenance, and if we're going to be staffing it, then we're going to have to budget for that as well. So, it's a big balance to make sure that.
And if you need to price it so that you get a payback on your investment, you price it too high, and then people will search out the free parking. They're for $3, yes, they'll park there for an hour. But if you're going to charge me $8 to park for an hour, then I'm going to park 5 blocks away if I can get a free parking stall. And
well, then they'll get exercise. So
that's right.
So that's good too.
I was thinking the people who want to use the park, maybe they're the ones that don't mind doing the walking.
Doing a little walking, and that was some of what Donald Shoup has to say about parking. He said that if you price it appropriately, then you'll have so many. You should have it priced so that you've got about 85% of your spaces filled, and you've got about 15% available, so that. And then the business owners are happy with that, because they know that if somebody comes downtown to purchase something, then they will be pretty sure that they'll be able to get a parking space. Whereas now, how many people are avoiding downtown because they don't know for sure that they're going to be able to get a parking space? So there's part of that balance again.
Right. And we want to see that infusion of cash. We don't want people avoiding going to Hudson.
Yes, exactly.
Because it's too hard to find a parking spot if you want to eat there. And then also employees. I mean, employees want to be able to safely get in and out of work. And so having additional parking for them is maybe kind of an employer benefit. So I would imagine there'd be permitted spots that the city might have to contract with business owners to get, and so forth.
That was something that the consultants brought up, in that having parking paid for only until 5 or 6 o'clock, you may be having some employees of some of the restaurants taking up some of the prime parking spots, because they only have to put a couple quarters into the meter to get 2 hours, to get them through till after the meters are no longer monitored, and then they're there all night. And so it might be a good idea to have the meters going until 8 o'clock. So that's something that the study suggests that we look at. And there's a lot of questions to be answered.
Absolutely. So it sounds like you would say that having fun. You're enjoying your
Yes, I
time on
am.
the city council and want to return. Last question, because we're wrapping up our time, and that is, you mentioned being the liaison to the school district, and I know that 2 years ago when you ran, there might have been a different public perception on the relationship between the school district and the city. How do you think that that's come now in the last 2 years?
Oh, there's been a huge change. First of all, Dr. Willett has done a really good job of reaching out to all of the council members. And I remember going to see him for the first time just to chat with him, and I was expecting that I'd be there for half an hour, and we spent an hour and a half talking about all the different things about the city. And then with all that's going on now, my district is the one that's the most affected by the construction at the high school. And we've had a lot of complaints about student parking, about concerns about the plan for the high school, putting in the stadium and the lighting, and having a buffer between the houses and the school. And he has been very proactive about reaching out. So if I've forwarded a complaint to him, he's been there. And then with the student parking issue, he and Peg Shoemaker were there for the meetings to make sure that the school knew what was going on and could give us input as far as the student parking issues and parking in residential only areas.
Obviously, I'm a little biased in that assessment, but I would say that I think that you're accurate as far as there being a perception, at least, that it has improved, and I think substantively it has improved. And we're hopeful that this plan that the city just approved, all those issues that you talked about with lighting and parking and so forth, we've tried to really work with the city in addressing every way that could, including expanding Vine Street to include a left turn lane, everything we can to try and improve the citizen safety and student safety. So.
Yes, and it's going to be another couple of years that we're going to be working together to make sure that everything gets done.
Well, thank you. Thank you for your service, and thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you.
Good luck in the election, and we'll be interviewing your opponent here in about 3 days. So we've been talking to Joyce Hall, incumbent candidate for District 6 on our Hudson City Council. I want to thank our viewers for watching another segment of Western Wisconsin Journal.